I haven't been feeling too good lately, if I'm being honest. I don't know what's come over me. I think it might be withdrawals. Do you know how long it's been since we looked at a game actually worth looking at? It's been 5 months! So, we need to rectify this problem with a good series of games. Something I haven't played before. A lot of you guys have requested over the years that I take a look at Croc, Legend of the Gobbos, so I think it's finally time we take a look at this Croc. The game opens with a beautiful cutscene. Croc, the adorable little orphan, arrives in this land and the Gobbos raise him as their own. Once he grows up, Baron Dante and his Dantinis, kind of like martinis or bikinis, arrive and steal the fuzzballs away. That's it. But it's all you need. It concisely explains who Croc is, what's going on, and the character's motives for going on an adventure, all without saying a word. It's what I'd call a perfect introduction. The object of the game is to travel through 4 different lands, each with 6 levels and 2 boss fights, to rescue all of the Gobbos in each stage. Most of the time, this requires completing simple puzzles or finding keys to unlock cages, but they can also be found just hanging out. The first thing that gets my attention, though, is the controls. I'm not ashamed to admit, I'm a man who prefers a D-pad to analog control when it comes to games like this. But no matter which method I use, these are some of the most sluggish driving controls I've ever seen. And yes, I said driving controls, because maneuvering Croc requires indicating, wide turns, and the analog control unlocks goddamn power steering. Driving stick gives Croc more fluent movement and the use of the right stick for camera control, but I find he's a lot more finicky and hard to deal with on smaller platforms. While using the D-pad is much stiffer, you can pivot on the spot to help line your jumps up better and catch yourself after a tricky jump. I think the worst thing about it is that because the earlier levels give you so much space, you don't really have to think about it until the game hits you halfway through with heavier amounts of platforming challenge. Scattered throughout the levels are these crystals, which earn you an extra life at 100, as well as acting as an extra hit point, much like in Sonic. What really peeves me though is that in Sonic, you theoretically have the chance to recollect every single ring you dropped, but not in Croc. You could have 99 crystals and only get the chance to pick up 10, which is easier said than done since they disappear within seconds. But there are also 5 coloured gems in each level. Picking these up opens a door at the end and allows you to collect a hidden Gobbo. Shits me though, because these coloured crystals aren't obvious. You'll think you're picking up a regular crystal only for it to transform into a coloured one. So that means you have to go out of your way to collect every single one of these things if you want to clean sweep a stage. I don't know why they did that, because after knowing it's a waste of time trying to collect these crystals for lives, when the tiniest mistake loses all of my progress, naturally, I'm not in the mood to go out of my way on the chance of a required item. I understand that they want to hide these items off of the main path, but so many of them are on the main path anyway, and even still, why can't they just be shown as coloured gems? Imagine picking up a standard gem in Crash only for it to transform into a coloured gem. Fucking why? The levels in this game are about as linear as you can get. Even in the more maze-like locations, you'll still pass by every section on your way to the end goal. Like I mentioned before, they start off much more open and then turn into more platforming and puzzle solving as you work through the game. I feel like they start off a little too simple, but once the structure and challenge started getting more involved, I found myself enjoying them a lot more. With only 4 themes, they all look and sound the part and actually remind me of the original Crash Bandicoot, starting off bright and colourful, then transitioning into darker caverns and ending in a castle. I like how 1 minute you can be roaming a certain area and all of a sudden you've transitioned into an underground cave. But unfortunately, the loading screens really kill the flow. Even though the levels are only short, they're made even shorter being split up into tiny sections. You clear this area and then load up the next. It makes everything feel a lot more disjointed as the music cuts and switches to a different tune constantly. All of the music in this game is great and really suit the level themes, but they're cut up and switched around so much that not only do you hardly get to hear them, but each level gets around 12 different music tracks. And this is more of a personal thing for me, but I think it's important that individual levels feel like they exist within the grand scheme of a game. And we don't get that here. Sometimes you can go down from the surface only to come back out onto the surface. Figure that out. Even though it's only a few seconds to load each area, the frequency of it makes every level feel like 20 minutes of hard work until you realise that a clean sweep was only 5 minutes. It really drags on for me. Not to mention, if you slip right at the end because of some bullshit and happen to be on your last life because you gave up trying to save crystals hours ago, that you then have to repeat the entire level again through some very tedious gameplay, waiting for platforms, backtracking, and double checking you collected every single crystal, it's just not enjoyable to play in the long run. I'm well aware breaking each area up into shorter segments is a technique to save on resources. The levels are expansive enough that they can't be loaded all at once, I get that. But for 1997, smack bang in the middle of this platformer collectathon boom period, when every other game was exploring outside the boundaries of their respective systems' limitations and breaking them to pull off some of the greatest video games of all time, Croc, in a simple term, just feels out of date. I think it's time to mention that Croc was originally pitched to Nintendo as a 3D Yoshi game, but was ultimately turned down. That explains why everything is all cutesy and kid-friendly in a time when attitude was a big seller. As the story goes, however, seeing the game influenced Nintendo when it came to creating Super Mario 64. A game like this pre-Mario 64 is a really big deal. But following Mario 64 and the likes of Crash and whatever else is the reason Croc feels so out of date. By the time Croc was released, newer, more advanced methods were in use that allowed for much more open, detailed levels, so Croc spending half of his game underground in maze-like hallways is just a cop-out. Seriously, Croc has more underground than Tony Hawk's Underground. The better looking locations were used sparingly in comparison to the generic cave setting, I'd say because you could fit more stuff into these areas without the system spontaneously combusting. The more I play this game, the more I feel like spontaneously fucking combusting. In some of the later levels, I swear, this game spikes its difficulty up. Maybe because I'm here without proper training for certain aspects, but even still, I started dying a lot in the third area. The depth perception is off for certain jumps, sometimes I survive getting slammed on the monkey bars and other times I fall off and die, and these Dantinis that fire projectiles, unavoidable! Those pricks take no prisoners. But then the bosses are some of the most pathetic, pushover pansies I've ever seen. Look at these guys. Do they incite fear? Have you shit your pants yet? They look slow in the head. Hello? Anybody These guys make Toasty, Shemp, Blowhard and the rest of Spyro's bosses look like absolute gods in comparison. Okay, that's a bit of an exaggeration. But at least those characters are somewhat memorable. Much like Spyro, we have something of a level before the fight, but every single battle is just avoid, strike, avoid, strike, avoid, and strike. Done. There isn't even anything all that creative or interesting done with them. Dante transforms some harmless kid into this pest, so Croc just comes along and springs sticks of dynamite at him. Pretty fucked up when you think about it. The only other boss of note is the underwater one. Kind of uncommon to find an underwater boss in games, especially in the fucking desert-themed area, that's for sure. While we're on that topic, the swimming in this game is a rare occurrence and controls kind of awkwardly, but I've still played worse underwater levels. Tell me though, if Croc can swim, then why does he die from dipping his toes in water? Seriously, what kind of inconsistent logic is that? Water sometimes kills you and sometimes doesn't. Sometimes I fall off the monkey bars and other times I'm fine. Some crystals appear normal when they really aren't. It's all over the show. What happened here? However, I will give the game some credit. There are no vehicle levels here. Every level is platforming, the main attraction, which is an accolade this game can hold over many, many others. But then out of nowhere, we have this super short puzzle gauntlet with mini-games, exploding tomato ghosts and challenges so quick, it's almost impossible to react in time. Then the final level is just an endurance of these flipping platforms. No enemies, no collectibles aside from the coloured crystals, just waiting and waiting and fuck! I hate this shit. There are like 5 different patterns happening at once. How am I supposed to do this with these unreliable controls? Honestly, I'm fed up with the game at this point. These last stages are some of the most frustrating, not because they're technically challenging, but because it's a challenge to make jumps and stay on platforms. Every jump is done sideways because turning sometimes isn't an option, and I'm constantly safety jumping just trying not to fall off. Does this look fun to you? After all of this, we make it to Dante. Everything is pretty simple here until bang! You're dead. Start again. These lightning blasts are so quick, you've only got a few frames before you're fucked. I actually switched over to the analog stick at the very end here. The more fluent movement and what I think is slightly faster pace actually made it so much easier, making it that much more anticlimactic in the process. No fanfare or much of a celebration, you just get to win. But that's not all. Collecting all of the Gobbos in each land opens up 2 new secret stages, so 8 in total. There isn't much to do here aside from get to the end and collect a Jiggy. After completing all of these, like I did right here, because I like to be thorough, unlocks the 5th and final island. Wow, this is disappointing. Makes me glad I cheated, honestly. There are only 4 levels here, each one taking a theme we've already seen, and blatantly using a mishmash of different sections we've already played. Seriously, it's just copy, paste, nothing new, with no goal other than making it to the end of each level. That'll do for a grand reward, who cares? Passing this grants you the final true boss, the Secret Sentinel, who is fucking easy. Just bang on the gongs and you're done. For everything that I've done to get here, it's a seriously underwhelming feeling, seeing that after hours of hard work. Looking back over it, this game started off with some potential and got enjoyable, but then nosedived off the deep end once the flaws became more apparent. In the good column, the levels, despite being split up, are themed nicely with some cartoony visuals and great music. None of those levels were wasted on pointless vehicles, and there are a lot of memorable sections here, both for good and bad. I don't think the controls are the worst thing, but they're still unacceptable, definitely out of date, along with the methods of loading the levels. Both of those things combined make the experience a slog to get through, and with no real payoff, story or collectible wise, I wouldn't call it bad, but I wouldn't call it good either. Croc, Legend of the Gobbos gets 5 out of 10. The thing that hurts this game most is the control. It's not comfortable to play, D-pad or analog. If they'd fixed that and given the collectibles more value, this could have easily been deserving of a 6 or 7, but that's just not the case. I feel like the only people who could really enjoy this game are those who played it as a kid, or those who are still kids. But beyond that, I really don't see anyone getting much out of it. I wish I'd just played something else, to be perfectly clear. This has left me with such a plain, ordinary, nothing feeling that I can't even create the words I need to finish it. I need some fresh air. Oh, come on! This is ridiculous! God damn it. All I wanted was to play something good for a change, but no! Mediocrity, again. Why would you guys even suggest I play something so mundane? Leading me astray like that. Do you like seeing me suffer? Hello? I know I'm not crazy. Somebody is watching me right now. Where are you, you son of a bitch? I know you can hear me. Show yourself! Wahoo! What the fuck? So hang on. You're a friendly crocodile?
Oi, cunt!
Hey, no need to snap at me, good sir.
Who do you think you are coming to my lake and polluting my home without a good bloody explanation?
Look, I was disappointed with the game, so I came here to cry about it. What more do you want?
I'll give you something to cry about, Cobber, and I'm not playing no games. How do you expect me to raise me young'uns here if the lake is filled with your trash?
Well, if I had something good to play for once, then maybe I...
So it's a good game you want to play, huh? Well then, why don't you try this on for size?
Croc too? You must be dreaming.
Now shove off, or I'll roast you.
I get that reference.
Fuck off!
Look, I promise I'm not insane, alright? At least, not yet anyway. The game opens to a cutscene of this scientist gobbo stumbling upon a fucking satanic resurrection of Baron Dante until he's captured by some Dantinis. In other news, Croc is playing on the beach with some gobbos in complete silence. Until he discovers a message in a bottle containing an image of his own paw print. So he's flung into the atmosphere and the game begins. Right off the bat, I can already notice some big changes. For starters, the game now includes a hub area to explore with various gobbos to converse with and ultimately help out. They tell us our objective and then we transition into a level. I'm noticing the controls don't feel as stiff as last time, but for whatever reason, we've lost the ability to use fine movement to line Croc up correctly. In the first game we could pivot on the spot, sidestep, and most importantly flip 180 degrees. I didn't mention it last time, but that ability was the saving grace for all those harder platforming sections. But we don't have that here, and with the lack of any camera control, even wide open, safe spaces in the first level can be a challenge. My first 5 crystals of the game, ladies and gentlemen. What a first impression. Since we've got actual hit points now, crystals are used as currency. Any you collect are added to your credit card and can be used to buy various items at Swap Meet Pete's store. Man, this got complicated real fucking quick. I mean, it's just a collectathon with mostly linear levels. Why do we need all this junk? We can purchase extra hit points, jelly jumps to bounce Croc up to high places, and these robot gobbos, which just run down a track to collect a bunch of bullshit. Assuming you can even get to the end of a track before its batteries die out. These items only grant you access to the extended collectibles being coloured crystals again, all coloured correctly this time, thank you, but even though none of it is required to get through the levels, it's still annoying reaching the end only to find out you needed one of these items to clean sweep. So that's how the items and collectibles work in this game, and quite honestly, it's all unnecessary fluff. Why do we need to complicate things so much? Is the game that void of substance? If this first level is anything to go off, I can tell this experience is going to be quite different in comparison to the first game. Gone are the short little sections in exchange for expansive levels. Even though that draw distance is short, it just proves how much nicer a location can be to play through if it actually feels like a location. And any times we need to load up a cave or somewhere else within a level, it's instant. The structure of the levels themselves, like I mentioned, is more akin to a linear collectathon than a linear platformer. With the more open spaces, the game doesn't actually feel all that bad to control, but I can't help but shake the feeling that this decision was made in some lazy attempt to make the awkward control scheme work instead of refining it and making it better. But that first level wasn't too bad, so let's check out the next one. Level 2 has us travelling on these little mine carts to different sections of this cave looking for treasure. Really? A minecart? Legend of the Gobbos had no vehicle levels, and now second level in, I have to ride this thing around? It moves so fast, I barely have time to react if I want to collect anything, and the rest of this level just makes me look like a dumbass. You guys should know by now how much I hate looking at a dark screen. Well, how do you think this makes me feel? I was only just praising how much better the levels look and feel in comparison to the first game, only to be given this. I know caves are supposed to be dark, but this is just overboard. Whatever, let's move on to level 3. Best the Dantinis in a boat race. Is this a joke? Well, it's not funny regardless. 2 of the first 3 levels involve some kind of vehicle. Were they that spent after the first game that they just had no ideas? I know vehicle levels can help split up the gameplay somewhat and can in a lot of cases be some of the most memorable parts of a game. But this, look how fucking desperate this is! Most of the time I can't even see the other races, and despite pissing about trying to collect all the crystals, I still managed to win without even trying. And to think I bitched about Smokey and the Bandicoot. This here is so much worse. The normal levels are perfectly fine on their own, we don't need this garbage. Once you complete the 5 levels and boss within a village, you get to fight the true boss of that area and advance to the next. Up first is Cannon Boat Keith, and... what's going on here? Huh, that's strange. We're supposed to get a cutscene, but nothing is happening. Alright, well, let's try that again. Oh my god. Is it even loading? Is it frozen? I mean, I've seen cutscenes glitch up and freeze before, but this loaded a static location from the cutscene that is supposed to play here. I've never heard of that happening before. Oh well, I guess we've got to cheat. Again. Luckily we can jump straight to the next area, the snow area. First level in, I must say, this is easily one of the best levels I've played so far out of both games. I mean, the draw distance and skybox make me feel like I'm going blind, but in general, it's a fairly pretty level with some of the best snow music I've ever heard. This is an exception to the rest of the soundtrack, however. While some songs return from the first game, the soundtrack is far more generic this time around, with some incredibly repetitive and boring tracks. And with every level being much more open, we actually get to hear these tracks for an extended period of time, which only hurts them because they don't enhance their respective levels. But like I said, there are exceptions. I just wish this level wasn't cursed with these god-awful rope swings. Ugh. I don't know what it is with these bitches. Either I jump off and land short of the platform, or I fair fly over the fucking things. Very rarely can I get Croc to land perfectly, and I'm normally so stunned, I freak out and safety jump getting myself killed anyway. And unfortunately, the rest of this area is massively underwhelming. We've got the lava cave, which is a gauntlet of annoying platforming challenges, a maze-like level where all you have to do is follow a damn trail, terrain, and then all of a sudden, I'm riding balls around in the snow trying to snake down these narrow pathways, again, reminding me of Wrath of Cortex. Then Croc has to drop ice cubes down from a hot air balloon to freeze a giant fish. I can't believe the scenario I just described, and now I'm hang gliding. Fuck you, you little green prick. A beautifully serene and gorgeous level wasted on this. Once we finish up here, it's time for the moment of truth. Will the Snow Village boss load correctly? The answer is yes, but we don't even get to fight him. Instead, we're just throwing ice cubes into these lava pits to trap him and move on to the next area, the Caveman Village. So, we're getting 2 jungle-themed areas? Great! One thing this game does do better over its predecessor is making each of the boss fights feel unique. They're not good, but they are unique. Most of them don't actually involve fighting the enemy, but they're at least memorable in comparison to the jokes we faced last time. This caveman area is so awful though. The first 2 levels have us going into the jungle and then into a mine to find race car wheels, which, yes, means we have to ride the minecart again. Only this time, you fly off the sides and have to start the entire level over again because there are no checkpoints. Seriously, I got so close to the end of this level filled with challenging jumps and these fucking rope swings, collected all of the race car wheels, made one tiny mistake, had to backtrack through the entire empty level again just to get another try, only to make it one jump further and fucking die again. Game over. Sorry I can't react that quickly because there is a giant wall of black across the entire screen. Not that it even matters. Apparently, I was allowed to keep those race car wheels despite never finishing the level and getting a game over. Well, aren't I a lucky boy? Because there was no way I was going back into that mine. And now that I have the race car wheels, it's time for the go-kart level. Fuck this. It's so slow, so stiff, and again, everyone just buggers off and leaves me to myself, so that I can give out about the fact that when you drive through this river, the game slows way down because it can't handle how epic this is. Oh, please. I can't take much more of these awful vehicles in these boring, repetitive environments, listening to the same 20-second ditty I've been hearing on loop since I got here, all for collectibles I couldn't give a toss about, just to fight some pre-tendo bosses and advance to the next area. Which isn't even finished! The 4th village only contains 2 levels. One has you climb a waterfall and the other is in a marketplace rescuing 30 gobbo babies. You have to search high and low for these little bastards and take them back to one of the 4 playpens. Why can't I just collect them? Why do I have to painstakingly pick up and carry every single one miles and miles away? The level right before this had me saving gobbos from a bushfire. I didn't have to carry all 50 of them back to some designated point, so why do I have to do it here? Not to mention this art design is so lifeless. Everything is brown, grey and pitch black as far as the eye can see. Which isn't far. This is so dark, I'm prepared to say Croc actually looked better split up into short sections, embracing the system's limitations instead of trying to fight against them. And all to the tune of the worst song in the game. Just this. For 15 minutes. The first time I did it, because I was killed trying to jump up onto a ledge and had to start the entire thing over again, carrying 30 fucking babies over to their fucking cribs in fucking darkness to this fucking music. Fuck! I can't take much more of this! And to think, I didn't even collect all the coloured crystals while I was in there. I've failed to mention so far, but collecting all of the coloured crystals in a level works much like it did in the first game. Collecting them all grants you access to a golden Gobbos statue, but you don't just get the statue, of course not. Sometimes you do, but other times you'll abruptly get transported to a bonus area. If you fail to secure the statue while you're in there, not only are you kicked back out to the main level, but you can't attempt that stage again unless you exit the level and go all the way back through again, just for another shot at these fucking rope swings. Collecting all of the statues in a village opens up a secret level where you can collect a Jiggy, just like last time. But you can see why I didn't bother wasting my time with this shit, because, as is the story of this game, it's just another simple concept made way more convoluted and frustrating than it needs to be. So imagine my face when I randomly unlocked one of these levels without any of the golden statues in that area. Let's check it out. It's just a giant, confusing fucking maze to that fucking music! Okay! I'm ready for the final boss. Well, where do I even start with this? Croc finds a plane that Professor Gobshite was building at the start of the game. Apparently somebody has moved it from the jungle up into the top of a pyramid. The game just brushes over that one, so I will too. So now we're flying around shooting at Dante, who appears to be gripping on tight to a frosted knob? I don't know, it's absolutely depressing. We then have to make our way through another puzzle gauntlet and climb this tower before the slime consumes us. I feel like I've seen this a million times by this point, and I probably have. We reach the top, drain out the mighty goo while Croc has a fucking fit, and then it's back to Dante. Like all the other bosses, we don't actually attack him. Instead, we have to defend the Professor Gobbo while he prepares the coloured crystals. Dante literally forms minions out of piles of shit for this finale. Really no better image to sum up this experience than that. The time twister malfunctions or whatever, and Dante is history. Croc and the Professor fly the plane to an island somewhere to find Croc's long-lost parents. See, that was the entire point of this game, finding his parents. I didn't feel like mentioning that because I was shocked to learn that part myself. If you have even less respect for your time on this earth than I do, you can make the effort to go through collecting all of the golden gobbies and jigsaw pieces to unlock a fifth secret world much like the first game, but I wouldn't recommend it. All of the levels are just harder variants of everything you've already played through, all to save some dumb crocodile eggs. What I'm more interested in is seeing if that slack Cannonboat Keith has decided to show up for work now that I've beaten the game. No. What a fucking crock! For starters, even though I do prefer the original game's platforming gameplay, in comparison to this running through hallways style, this game proves that having levels feel like actual levels, instead of a bunch of tech demo sets randomly pieced together, can be really important to get right. The extra space we have to move around takes some displeasure off the controls, but most of everything else is definitely worse. The overabundance of mediocre vehicles aren't enjoyable, and take away from any good the actual levels can do. Most of the music is a lot more generic than the original game's soundtrack, and we're forced to listen to it so much more. While the visuals are still good and even gorgeous at times, having multiple jungle maps of green and brown, and then still having a lot of underground areas which are grey and pitch black, most of the game fails to be very appealing. Bosses are better than they were before, but they're still not good bosses, and even though collectibles make more sense this time around, the hoops you have to jump through to clean sweep this game are just annoying, to the point where it's even less rewarding going through all of this for 100% than it was in Legend of the Gobbos. Croc 2 gets 4 out of 10.
G'day, Cobber. Why the long face?
That's my gimmick!
Yeah, real fucking funny, you piece of shit. No wonder you're laughing. Giving me this piece of shit to torture myself with. You make me sick, you know that?
How fucking pathetic. Is that the best you've got? Come on, I like my meals salty.
Hey, I'm sick of being treated like a goddamn puppet. Play this garbage, play this filth. Are you having fucking fun yet? Do you want to kill yourself? Well, yes, because all I do is play these appalling, atrocious, sickly, horrendous fucking games for the entertainment of all you bloody reptiles. So excuse me if I'm a tad fucking salty. Wait, what did you say about a meal? We gotta get out of here before he gets back. I didn't save the eggs in Croc too. I'm not gonna make that mistake again.
So, you think you can run from me, do you, Cobber? Well, now I'm... Huh? What? No! Take my kids, I take your life.
Man, look at that! A real bona fide crocodile egg! Why the fuck did I steal it? What was I thinking? Now that bastard is gonna come looking for them. And the worst thing of all, the damn thing talks! Something is alive inside this egg, so I need to be very delicate with this thing. Oh my god! A baby croc! You're going in the machine, you little bitch! Croc on Game Boy Color was released in 2000 on June 6th. Well, shit, he's no baby Croc. He's of legal drinking age here in Australia. Have one of these, mate. There you go, suck it down. Now, I haven't played too many Game Boy titles in my day, but going off of the title screen, this looks and sounds like Croc. The game is a side-scroller, as you may expect, and at a glance, it doesn't look too awful. We still make our way through caves and different areas, exploring the same four lands from the console and PC version. So it is faithful, but let me tell you what it's really like. The concept is the same as the first game. Progress through the levels, smashing Dantinis, collecting crystals and saving Gobbos. It's simple enough like the first game and follows that trend with the controls. I couldn't call it bad, but something just feels off about it. Whether the screen is zoomed in too far or Croc is just inherently quick, I find myself gradually tapping myself forward and stopping after every jump. You have to be very deliberate while platforming here because it's easy to fuck up and die. Or maybe I'm just not used to portable games. I'm not ruling that out either. But then look at this shit. First level of the game and I can't even kill these guys. There is no range to Croc's attacks. You literally have to be on top of enemies to land a hit, and even then, it still doesn't connect. You can R-slam them, but your only other option is attacking while on the move. And just take a guess how that works out. fucking perfectly, every time. Attacking on the move keeps your momentum, causing you to fall into pits or other hazards. If you're like me, then you're thinking of the original Crash Bandicoot where the same thing happened, but this is much worse. As you go through the levels, you can also find these letters that spell bonus, and collecting all of them grants you access to a mini-game where you can rescue an extra Gobbo, like the original. Can I just say one thing though? Fuck these things! I hate them! Some of the other mini-games are okay, but this is just pain and suffering. This first area really isn't much to write home about, if I'm being honest. Audibly, the experience is familiar with remixed, bit-crushed versions of the music we heard last time, but visually, what happened to the bright and vibrant art design? I know we're on much weaker hardware, but everything just looks all dark and smudgy. Everything is green and brown, so Croc starts to blend into the background, and it's just not pleasant. Even the snow levels manage to be primarily green. What's with that? Before the first boss, we've got this impossible level inside of mine. I run for maybe 10 seconds and get killed every time. I found through sheer luck mashing buttons that there is actually a run ability which is key to this level. Yeah, try neatly platforming while Green Sonic here charges through the damn place. Green Sonic being Vector, of course. Man, I was determined to work that in there, wasn't I? Only half the bosses from the first game are here, and Flibby is up first. Awful. The others are okay, nothing special, but still better than this. Once we reach the snow area, things take a strange turn. In a real Croc 2 move, now all of a sudden we have a heap of vehicle levels in each area. First we're riding along this chairlift, and now we're skiing. Really? Fucking cross-country Croc over here! I was not ready for this. Moving on to the desert area, I must say, very pleased with how all of this looks. A lot of red in the caves, but it's just a breath of fresh air in comparison to everything else so far. Just be wary of those water fountains though, they're a killer. Glad they kept that sound logic of having Croc be hurt by water, and yet still having no problem swimming through the stuff. Yes, this game does actually retain the underwater levels, and while the original games wasn't the worst I'd ever played, this here is getting pretty close. I hadn't really noticed it until now, but this game has an awful problem scrolling vertically. Down seems fine, but up jars the graphics so much, it's actually starting to hurt my eyes trying to look at this. In fairness, you most likely wouldn't notice it on an actual Game Boy screen, but through the GameCube, this is painful to look at. Luckily for me, with these pathetic but super short vehicle levels, this thing will be over soon. The castle area doesn't have any vehicles, but actually does a pretty decent job at building up suspense for the ending of the game. Starting off walking up through the jungle, climbing the castle walls and entering, only to find some confusing levels and our final opponent. Baron Dante offers a good challenge while you're learning his patterns, but in the end, he's taken down without much of an issue. Croc is congratulated by all the Gobbos in the land and then sits to reflect on his journey. The entire final act really gave me some Castlevania vibes, and that was the last thing I expected to get from this game. I'd like to start off my closing thoughts by making it known this was very faithful to the original game. But while the music and some of the visuals were really good, I do think the game overall doesn't look good, even by the system standards and what was possible before it. The structure of the normal levels was about what you'd expect from a game like this, and the vehicles, even though short-lived, did actually help to break the game up instead of dragging it to a halt as we saw last time. But the control, man, it's not the best. For what it is, it was okay, but in the grand scheme of things, Croc 2000 was below average for me. So Croc on Game Boy Color gets 4 out of 10. Honestly, I think that score fairly represents this downgraded port. Not as good as the original obviously, but not a total drop off a cliff either, like we saw last year with Perfect Dark on N64 and its translation to Game Boy Color. Where did that other bugger get to?
Gotcha!
The Game Boy Color sequel starts off with a much more concise opening cutscene. Gone is the awkward silence in exchange for basic dialogue actually explaining that this is a quest to find Croc's parents. Thank you! He pack attacks away and we land right into the game. First impressions lead me to believe I'm being tricked into playing an RPG here, bloody Croc's Awakening or some shit, but no, the game is just an overhead view. I do think it works for the format a lot better, seeing as Croc 2 was presented in a more open manner. Each area only has 3 levels and then a boss to continue. We've still got the unnecessary addition of a store, but at least none of it matters all that much. These levels still retain some of the loose themes from the original, such as saving a gobbo from a cage, finding treasure and retrieving a stolen sandwich, but the levels for the most part are just about getting to the end. Something that's much easier said than done. Majority of the levels split somewhere along the line, sometimes multiple times per location, but because nothing with the graphics really stands out, it's very easy to get lost and forget where you've already been, as enemies respawn and the world is barren of items. It's so empty. And so fucking green too. Look how green this is. The only game I've ever seen that's greener than this is fucking Stampede on Atari 2600 for Christ's sake. And it just makes me wonder, how have I made it this far without mentioning this problem that's plagued the entire series? Let's take a look at Crash Bandicoot. Why is he orange? Because orange is generally a colour that is going to stand out from the background. Same for Mario's predominant colour being red. It stands out from most natural backgrounds. Croc is green, the primary colour of this entire series. It's unescapable, and because of that, Croc blends in so easily. With every game, it just got worse and worse to the point where I can't ignore it anymore. Even though it is only the first and final worlds that are mostly affected by this, the entire game overall has such a weaker colour palette in comparison to Croc 2000. Even though that game was a bit darker and had a nice blur smeared across the entire image, we had a rainbow of colour throughout with sunsets, spooky night scenes, deserts and caves, but in Croc 2 there is only green on brown, white on blue, brown on red, and green on grey. Not to mention all the black that's everywhere. Man, this really is Croc 2 on Game Boy Color. More like Game Boy without much colour! The music here is also pretty lackluster and repetitive as all hell. In a very Legend of the Gobbos move, this game removes all the pointless vehicles that ruined the second game, so all we do is walk around these maze-like levels, trying to find our way and solve some puzzles in the process. Any platforming you come across can be pretty annoying as well, because of shoddy depth perception. The exact reason Zelda never tried jumping in his games. In an attempt at fairness though, I can't completely shit on this game. The bosses, while fairly easy and very basic, are an improvement over the previous Game Boy Color game, and even though certain areas can be annoying, levels for the most part are fine for a handheld title anyway. Getting through to the end and facing Dante was actually a solid reward, to be perfectly serious with you. Definitely the best final boss of the Croc series so far. Yes, No bullshit, I really enjoyed this. The music has that big fight feel, and while it's still basic in design, the pace keeps your heart rate up and makes actually destroying him all that more satisfying. We don't get the true ending because be fucked if I'm going back through looking for golden gobshites, but I still felt like that journey was worth it in the end. I wish I had more to say about this game, but there really isn't much to it. It's tedious, yes, but still not totally awful to play anyway. I think had it had a few extra stages involving vehicles or just something to break it up, it could have been better. But still, I enjoyed myself with this as much as I did playing through the actual Croc 2. However, it's still not on that game's level technically. Croc 2 on Game Boy Color gets 3 out of 10. I think the lack in variety and somehow worse graphical showcase here was the biggest nail for this coffin. It's just a shame really. What I'd call the best Dante boss to date is here tucked away behind the lowest scoring game of the series. And yes, this is a portable game, so you've got to remember and take that into account, but I'm sorry, Croc just seemed dead in the water before he even got on his feet. Well, that's the Croc series, ladies and gentlemen. Very short-lived in the end.
Where are me fucking kids? Any last words, Cobber?
Yeah, actually I do. Splat, motherfucker! Where am I? Well, goodness! That's one big crocodile! I wonder what Steve Irwin would do in this scenario. Well, guess I better try to find a way out of here. But... God damn it. This is gonna be like that level in Kingdom Hearts, isn't it? Am I? Oh. Well, according to this map, it appears I'm in the stomach. Whoa! Look at this place! There must be years worth of trash piled up in here. Has he really been eating all of this junk? Man. That lake really is polluted. Oh, look! It's my old chair! I wonder how that got here. Can you guys hear that? coming from? You're shitting me! Croc? On mobile? And I thought the Game Boy Color games were primitive! Now we've got fucking Jungle Rumble on mobile! Let's get started! The title screen gives us that classic track from the first game. It's been 8 fucking years since we first heard it, and 4 years since Croc 2 on Game Boy Color. Why, oh fucking why, is Croc being revived in 2005 with a mobile phone game? What the balls? This Croc should have been neutered a long time ago if you ask me. Starting up, the game looks nice, actually amazing next to some of the other mobile games of the time, but I don't really know what I'm supposed to do. I can't access many of the gems, and I just start talking to a gobbo about Dante. Already? Damn, that's a short game. What happened here was that I accidentally walked past the entrance of the first stage, but can you blame me? I didn't know I could go in there. We get an overview of the stage and everything is looking good, until Croc has to answer his phone. I guess just because it's a phone game, they felt the need to incorporate that somehow. How original. Tutorial Gobbo gives us a rundown on how to play, and we're off. The controls are stiff as all hell, like you'd expect from a phone game. They were all rough, but it does make every enemy feel like a threat. Oh, now that was scary. Killing enemies is a pain in the ass, as there really isn't a whole lot you can do. Croc has his spin move, but it doesn't really work on the go, so you have to stand around and wait for enemies to walk into it. This is essentially a linear isometric puzzle game. We need to hit switches and traverse the level in the correct way, find a key and rescue a gobbo at the end. We've got moving platforms, falling platforms, and some regular platforming thrown in for good measure. Jumping takes some time getting used to though. Pressing the button doesn't just jump, it moves Croc forward a few spaces, unless the terrain is too high, in which case he just jumps up. The isometric view can be awkward at times, as the graphics look like they're leading you one way when they're really not. The way Croc moves and just the overall structure of levels reminds me a lot of Zappa, if you've ever played that. I can't say I've played much of it, but the grid-like movement is very similar. Even though the game isn't exactly hard, it can get confusing at times, and does require trial and error to get through certain areas. Levels can get large, so it's easy to fuck up and have to start over, but honestly, I think this is pretty good for what it is. Last year I thought Spyro Ripto's Quest was fairly faithful, but this is actually much better. After 8 levels, we drop down into this hole and fight Dante. Speaking of Spyro, this reminds me of that garbage first boss from the Fusion games back on GBA. We spin a few boulders back at his skull and advance to the next area. Yes, there is actually a second hub area. I'm in shock. Most of these primitive games would have been over by now, but no, we've got an entire desert area to get through yet. Everything here is so much better than the first area as well. Much less emphasis on water hazards and more on actual puzzle solving. The levels are also more open to play through, giving the jank controls a little extra breathing room, making it easier and more enjoyable than the first world. It even adds in new elements with different enemy types and these platforms that move in and out of the walls, like a real platformer. Even Crash's mobile games didn't have this sort of thing. At the end of the day, it is just a very restrictive and basic mobile game, but it puts a lot of the others we've seen to shame. We blast Dante with a few cages and the game is won. Despite some depth perception issues about the place and some of the earlier stages being a bit lackluster, I'm honestly blown away with this title. When was the last time you heard me praise a mobile game this much? Hell, when was the last time you heard me praise a Croc game this much? Did that ever happen? At any point during this entire series? It's a neat little phone game, simplicity done fairly well, and that's all I could ever ask for with this. Excuse me a moment. Hello? Hello? Hang on. I can't hear you too good.
Are you in a tunnel?
No. I'm in a belly.
Where?
I said I'm in a belly!
What's your favourite scary movie?
What's my favourite scary movie? Well, I don't know about movies, but I've got a game that'll scare you hard, shit your pants super brutal, and have you praying for death within seconds! Croc Pinball! On mobile fucking phone. Why? And I thought I was dumbfounded at the realization of Croc even existing on mobile. To witness this after all the filth I've seen, I think this takes the cake. I mean, I didn't expect much from a Croc Pinball mobile game to begin with, but Spyro Fairy Dress Up has more to offer than this. Don't get me wrong either, I love pinball. Even some pinball games can be very fun, but this just isn't. Aside from a few stray sound effects and the multi-ball power-up, this is the Croc of the entire series. But can you even fathom a third Croc mobile game? Croc Volcanic Panic, a direct sequel to Jungle Rumble. So, it's time to take one final tumble down the Dantini hole and end this series. We're on the final lap now, ladies and gentlemen. How Croc got a pinball game before a shitty kart racer, I don't want to know, but luckily, we're in for a pretty safe ride here. Everything moves, looks, and sounds like the previous game. Croc has to rescue all the Gobbos, including the bride-to-be of King Rufus, so off we go. The ante is upped here with a bigger emphasis on puzzles than all that platforming stuff, while it is still present. New elements include lots of timed platforms, moving terrain, pushing blocks to activate switches, and cross-dressing Dantinis. I don't get it. They looked perfectly fine before, like the actual Croc games. What's with the platinum ponytail, dress, blue high heels, and Dame Edna gogs? It's so out of place, but there is a lot of that here. Gobbos talk like fucking yobbos, mate. Even saying cheers, mate, after Croc rescues them, and having a perv on the king's bride-to-be. It's like the developers didn't give a fuck cause they knew they could get away with this informal shit. I love it. I'm not a big fan of this colour palette in the first area though, but it's not green, so I'm not complaining. Dante's first battle is fuck though. I guess we're supposed to push this block over these fire spouts to make the fire go back and attack him? I don't know. The second world is just plain gorgeous though. Nice, clean, tidy graphics, which is great to see. This area introduces some steeper puzzle challenge, and I actually found myself stumped a few times, which is good. That's what I want from a puzzle, as it's only more satisfying figuring out the solution and getting through. Overall, this game's difficulty is more balanced, but I think I might have enjoyed the first game just a little more. It had slightly more platforming challenge too, which was surprisingly fun. The second Dante battle here is all about rolling balls, but the bosses here are garbage in comparison. Though, while I'm not as hyped on this as the original, I did still enjoy playing it. I find these mobile games really interesting just to see how games can be interpreted on a different platform not really made for this kind of thing. And so far, Croc's mobile games are some of the best I've seen to date. Especially the pinball game. Yeah, and speaking of shit, filthy tumor-ridden fucking shit, I think it's about time I try to find my way out of this place, but I don't think I can get out the way I came in. God damn it. I would like to make a joke about this situation, but everything I come up with is shit. Ah! What? Wait. So, the killer crocodile, the eggs, the being eaten alive and shut out? That was all a dream? But if I've still got this, then that means...
Finished already, Cobber? Well, I'd say that was quick, but by your standards, you've probably never lasted that long! Oh, why the long face, sweetheart?
Have a great fucking day, Cobber.